started in the blockchain world right after the Bitcoin boom of 2013. So at the end of 2013, Bitcoin went up to $1,000 a Bitcoin, and it was like a really big deal. Previously, I actually had a friend who had told me about Bitcoin, and I'm like, it's magic internet money. Why would I even want that? No way, right? But after the boom, I started paying attention to it, and I didn't actually read the Satoshi white paper, but I got into the technology and why it was built and what it can do.
So you didn't read the Satoshi white paper.
I haven't. So I'm not a big white paper fan. I actually just started looking into the technology and how it's built, and that was really what I cared about. I know that a lot of people in the space are very I wouldn't call it political, but all the
Tribes.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it was all about the technology. So I wanted to figure out how to get into it, and I really dove deep. So there was a point in time where I had 12 video cards in my room in my apartment just mining. This is an apartment I shared with other people, and it was in Reno, Nevada. So it was super hot, and it's the summer, and of course I'm doing this to myself. But I got into mining. I got into trading of all these. At the time, we'll call them altcoins. Again, it's just another application of what we're now calling blockchain technology. I was working for a startup. In fact, I've only worked for startups in my whole career. And the startup I was working for, fortuitously, went out of business. Turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. So startup went out of business, and I had to look for another job. And by that time, this was early 2015, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go work in the blockchain. And went on angel.co, which is where you go if you're looking for startup jobs. And there was only one company that advertised a blockchain job, even used the word blockchain. That was Consensus, and came into Consensus as employee number 10, and that's really how I got into it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what was your inspiration for starting Truffle?
Right. That came out of just the need for the tools to exist. So Joe was the person who hired me, Joe Lubin, founder of Consensus, and he told me that I needed to figure out how to build a blockchain application. And I'm like, I have no idea how to do this. And as a normal developer, as you figure each piece out, you're not going to want to do those things over and over again by hand manually. You're going to write some scripts to help you out. So something that would be really hard, you can just press basically the equivalent of pressing a button, and you can do that task. Well, for my own project, I had maybe 7 or 8 of these scripts, and there were other people at Consensus that were like, hey, how did you do this? How did you do that? And I'm like, well, you know what? I could package this up as a single application and give it to you, and you could use it. And that's really how Truffle was formed, just as the need to make development easier. After I packaged it up and the first version was released, it kind of took off like wildfire, and now it's become the most popular blockchain development tool.
And so now is Truffle going to take over the world?
Yeah. So we started in Ethereum, obviously from that story, right? And our goal at the time, there was this presentation I gave to Joe in early 2017. I'm like, we are going to become the Ethereum development tool. We wanted to make Truffle synonymous with Ethereum development. So if somebody asked, hey, how do you develop on Ethereum, we wanted the answer to include Truffle. We ended up doing pretty good, but kind of outside forces made us something bigger. Other people wanted that development experience for other blockchains, and they just started integrating without us. In fact, there was the very Ethereum-like blockchain, Quorum, which is an enterprise blockchain, and they made their blockchain look and feel and act like Ethereum as far as Truffle's development tools are concerned. And so to integrate with them, we have this joke where all we had to do was write a blog post because we already supported them without doing any more work. And so now we're getting all these other blockchains coming in. They want support. The enterprise space has different needs than what exists in the public space. So we're working to integrate with them and become the blockchain development tool instead of just the Ethereum development tool.
Wow, that's really awesome. So I want to just touch on what you said earlier about life before Truffle. As a software developer, I started learning smart contract development, and just Truffle was already there, so I used it. And I often wonder, what was life like before Truffle? How did developers, deploy their apps, test their apps. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was rough. Life was rough. Before Truffle, they weren't testing their apps in the traditional developer sense. So when a developer comes to a new programming environment, and I'm using the word environment because like blockchain is a new environment, it's a new way to program. Like for instance, if somebody were to come into JavaScript, there's this whole ecosystem of things that help you program in JavaScript. That's the environment I'm talking about. Those things didn't exist in the blockchain world. There's a lot of things that developers expect that just weren't there. So, for instance, automated testing, which is like you write code that tests your application for you on a regular basis. That is something you, as a developer, it's like that's part of your day job almost, and that did not exist. In fact, that was a big leap to even make that happen. That was one of the first features that Truffle had. Like, hey, you can at least continuously make sure that your application is running the way you want. But there are other tools that just didn't exist. Like one of the biggest is debugging. Debugging is where you if like something happens in your application, you can actually like step through each individual line of code and go, right there, that's what happened, right? That didn't exist. And so like I remember programming some smart contracts that something happened. I would just know it failed, but I couldn't figure out where or how. And the only way to figure it out was to like comment out code. And by this time I'm trying to like build something out complex, something very complex, and you're commenting things out and you're like basically like cutting into it and it's just a mess. And you might figure out what happened after like 2 days of frustration, which now you can like figure it out in a couple minutes. So that's the type of things that didn't exist. I like to say that the Ethereum development at that time was like in regular software development in the 1970s. There's been like a lot of monetization of just the act of programming and what developers needs, and we're still working to get up to 2010 even, or 2019, but we're getting much closer now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can understand some of those pain points or empathize with you. I went to your workshop earlier about truffle teams.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that and explain to the audience what that is?
Yeah, so I appreciate you went to that workshop. That is the very first look of this product that we're building. So truffle teams at this point is more of a vision, I think, than where we at as a startup company, and we're building it in pieces, and it'll eventually become this great product. The problem that it solves is the problem the problem we're seeing in development teams in general. So I told you that like, hey, we were in the 1970s and now we're getting up to the 2010. Like developers have what they need now to deploy an application, meaning that they can actually build the application that they want, spend a ton of time building it, and actually deploy it live and have it running out in production in the real world with real users using it. The problem at that point is all of your concerns change. Once you have an application go from like just in the straight up building stage to finally out live, like you're not just building an application anymore, you're managing an application that exists, and you want to know information like how are people using it, what are they doing, what errors are they running into, where in the code are those errors. You want the application may be really important in the context of smart contracts. You may want certain actions to happen if other things happen. For instance, let's say you have a contract that holds a lot of value, and maybe some of that value is siphoning out of the contract when it shouldn't, kind of like the DAO hack. Well, with this product that we're building, we're hoping to add triggers so you can automatically perform an action, maybe pause the contract, prevent that from happening. What we're trying to do with Truffle Teams is help the teams of developers that are now managing an existing application and all of their concerns throughout.
That sounds awesome. I'm definitely excited to use it.
The morning session I attended was how Truffle is being integrated with Microsoft Azure. Yeah. And that was very interesting to see how it's being integrated and the types of tools that they're building to make it more as a service. And yet it's still so complex, even as it's sort of point and click sort of stuff. Can you speak more to some of those integrations you're doing and how that sort of lays out in the overall landscape, in terms of tools for coders, and then where that leads blockchain as a whole?
Yeah, so Microsoft, as you know, is huge for developer tools. In fact, they're probably best known for building developer tools. They are actively getting into the blockchain space because this is my own words, not theirs, but I agree with them that we think blockchain is going to be the next big computing platform. Developers need tools to build on that, to make the whole thing easier. They have already built tools that developers love, for instance, like VS Code. VS Code is a IDE, integrated development environment for building applications, and there are many developers that like to live in that application when they're writing their code. Personally, I'm a developer that I'm gonna be in command line all the time. I'm using I'm not using Notepad, but I'm using a text editor, my favorite text editor, or something else. But there are a ton that want to make it easier and want a kind of a push button, deploy, push button, compile, the whole deal. And so the first one is VS Code. So Microsoft has seen our tools and they really like what we're doing, and they want to provide that development experience to those developers that want to use VS Code. So that's step one. They are also integrating Truffle's tooling into we'll call it the back end of some of their services. So for instance, we have one of our tools is called Ganache, and we call it Ganache specifically because chocolate ganache is the core of a chocolate truffle. That code is actually, the Ganache core code is in everything that we do. And it simulates a blockchain. It can do a lot of powerful, it gives a lot of powerful features to help deploy a blockchain. It's not just the UI version that we provide, but that is a good application for some developers. So they're using that to power a lot of the really cool things that they're doing, and then they're using our tools to build on top of enterprise platforms. Like Microsoft themselves needs tools to build the applications that their customers want, and so they're working with us to integrate our tools into the platforms that their customers are asking for, so that they can build the applications they need.
And so then are there others besides Microsoft, or where does that lead generally for blockchain and for Truffle?
Sure. So just to be sure, when you say others besides Microsoft, you mean other tools creators or maybe other platforms?
Maybe other platforms, just kind of where's the way forward?
Yeah, so when we talk to enterprises, they've gotten the blockchain bug. They see what has happened in Bitcoin and what's happened in Ethereum and how Ethereum can change the blockchain world. But then they're concerned about how they're going to interact with this new system. For instance, they want privacy. So if they're going to put all their business logic on top of a blockchain, they're not ready at this point, at least given where the technology is, to share that with the rest of the world. And they also have their big businesses. They want to. They have a lot of transactions they need to process. They're doing a lot of things with these platforms, and current versions of public blockchains like Ethereum don't support the amount of transactions. So really what they care about is privacy and throughput. What they've done instead is to create, groups have done, to create other protocols that do support that privacy and do support the throughput that they need. And so for some of those examples are Hyperledger Fabric, JP Morgan's Quorum, and R3 Corda. And those applications help enterprises get all of the great features of blockchain while still providing the things that they care about. We could talk probably for a long time about where things are going to go in the future. For instance, what I see is these enterprises are mimicking what happened in the early internet. Early internet, no company was going to connect to other people's computers and just have that connection on the whole time. But now we have the World Wide Web, and that's exactly what happened. So companies started with intranet, and then broadened out. I think that's what's going to happen here. Right now, these enterprise blockchains are doing extremely well. Serving enterprise needs. We might see some of that connect back up to the Ethereum blockchain, or maybe you have the private network that they have, but still a connection, and we have a network of networks eventually. So does that make sense?
Yeah, and so what you're saying is you think that some of these private blockchains that are being stood up will eventually be permissionless and open?
Not necessarily, but they may be used in conjunction with the permissionless and open ones. So, for instance, like if you create a network of your own computers, I'm going to go back to the internet analogy. If you create a network of your own computers, you're eventually going to want to talk to somebody else. That's just not in your walled garden. So there's going to need to be a bridge. And I think that we're going to see these enterprise blockchains having that bridge to other networks. And each of these enterprise protocols give enterprises what they need in different ways. There's just attributes of one that might be more attractive to a certain enterprise than the other, which is why they're choosing each one. But they still may need to interact with another enterprise that might be on a different network or something else. And we'll eventually see these bridges, and we're going to have it should be a really exciting time. But we'll see how long that takes.
Right. Sort of VPNs still exist. It's just we also have the internet. Right. Yeah. You have a question?
What's something that you didn't know when you first started Truffle that you wish you did, that you know now?
That's a great question. I mean, I learned a lot of things throughout the process. Like when I started as an engineer, like at the time when Truffle was created, I was an engineer. Now here I am, like doing an interview and those sort of things. My whole career has changed. I think that it'd be great to have had like a heads up or somebody like teaching this. I'm kind of, I would say I'm not learning by fire. What's the trial by fire? Exactly. Thank you. Yeah, definitely learning as I go, and it seems to be working out well. But as far as like career wise, I'd love to have some coaching or something. There's definitely been like this is the startup life where it's this roller coaster. You have a lot of great things, and then the whole deal. So managing that would have been great. There's like definitely development and engineering things. So for instance, if you look at the old versions of Truffle, like they sucked, and that's all my code. Like it's all me. So Truffle was a one man band for 2 years. So and the way that some of the design decisions that I made definitely weren't right, but that's what I think that's what made Truffle the most popular tool, is because even though I may have made the wrong decisions, pushed that out to the community, and the community told me very quickly, like, hey, this is incorrect, do it this other way, and then you keep incorporating that feedback, and now we've got something that supports everyone.
Yeah, that's the beauty of these open source projects, where you get the community to weigh in and help build it up.
Right.
Yeah, very cool.
So what are you excited about next?
Well, we recently spun out of Consensus. I'm kind of giving you some of my keynote speech tomorrow, but we actually signed the papers to spin out on February 14th of this year. February 14th happens to be the day that chocolate is given out the most in the United States, right? Valentine's Day. So that's great for our branding. We didn't plan it. It's just the way that it went down. So now we're our own company, and as far as what I'm excited about, we're building this company. We're working with R3, we're working with Hyperledger, working with Microsoft, working with a bunch of different companies, and really becoming the blockchain development tool. And for me, like this whole thing, like I told you, it was a roller coaster, but it's been a great ride so far. Like we're becoming successful, and we're gonna make it. We're gonna likely get VC funding pretty soon. So maybe I'll answer your question in a one-liner. I'm excited about where we're going to go, and just the career opportunities. Again, like this is my career has totally changed throughout this whole process, and I get to do a bunch of things I never thought I'd be doing, like as a founder of a startup.
That's cool. Well, we're definitely looking forward to seeing the growth of Truffle and all the new features that you're building. And as a developer, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for building Truffle and making it easier for us to build decentralized applications.
Yeah, thank you for using it. I appreciate it.